Lefebvre's article we read on Monday. Lefebvre's theme depicted the right of the city as a shift that would restructure the power relations that rule the urban space, therefore taking the control from the state and giving it to the urban inhabitants. Lefebvre wanted to renew urban life into a space where people could encounter and exchange with one another and get complete use out of their moments and their time. Harvey took this theory and expanded it further. He emphasized the importance for the city to not only give people access to what already exists, but to also give people what they truly wanted that wasn't already available, to in fact morph the city into what he called our heart's desires. Harvey's first and most overriding point throughout the article is that the right to remake ourselves by establishing a different kind of urban sociality is one of the most precious but underused human rights. And, with this right, however, we come across the question of whose rights and whose city. Harvey seems to answer this question by saying that private elite interests currently hold the right of the city. The small and political elite who are shaping the cities to their own desires are in reality limiting the city's potential. Examples of this control are seen in the Mayor Michael Bloomberg's reshaping of Manhattan. He has prioritized the cities to interests of high-value businesses and expensive tourist destinations, consequently turning Manhattan into an exclusive gated community for the affluent. The same elitism is easily seen in college towns where much redesigning and improvements are made to colleges themselves, but not the surrounding towns. And before this was Yale and Johns Hopkins, which is a good example. But Harvey hopes to change the seat of power and instead suggest a socially just city. The implications of such a place are a little vague, so Harvey begins by explaining the current issues with creating this ideal city. To begin with, Harvey emphasizes how private property and the profit rate exceed all other inalienable rights. This coincides with our capitalistic society. Our society is run through market exchange capitalism and in fact is very much supported by urbanism. Urbanization helps support the surplus product capitalism produces and sells. And living with this capitalistic society comes with some negative implications such as injustice, inequality, and alienation. Another implication on our current city is urban life's appeal as a commodity. The city life has become entangled in the web of consumerism, tourism, knowledge, and culturally based industries that in fact rule our political economy. So instead of being part of this home, you're being part of something that's merely profitable. Cities are also gaining the tendency to segregate themselves into small, self-sustaining communities where the affluent can be separate. And such articles as Suburban Sprawl and Urbanization as a Way of Life highlight this trend to segregation and discuss its negative effects on sustaining urban identity, citizenship, and belonging. This segregation is further seen in regards to creative destruction, where nearly all urban reconstruction is targeted to those of the lower class. Creative destruction or dispossession is the capture of valuable land from the low-income populations that might have lived there for many years. The advantage of taking from the low-income populations, of course, is that because of their income insecurity, they are easily persuaded to give up their valuables or they're not protected by the law, which obviously differs from those of the rich who have no reason to give up their valued assets. With all these issues, with the current politics of the right of the city, Harvey calls for a readjustment that focuses more on the collective body of society as a means to reshape the processes of urbanization. Harvey declares that people should have an active right to make the city different because that in turn would allow the city to change as a whole. To reinforce this point, Harvey utilizes a lot of historical evidence to contrast the idea of collective power versus individual power. In his examples, urban infrastructure reconfiguration proved beneficial to fixing the capital surplus absorption problem. This is most evident with the radical urban change that Haussmann, who was just in that picture there, stemmed in Paris during the Second Empire. Haussmann brought a new way of life to the city by incorporating new financial institutions and debt instruments. Yet these urban improvements only lasted temporarily. In fact, when the financial system crashed, urbanization was in need of reconstruction again. Although Haussmann's approach was not eternal, Many others used his example of the workable urban infrastructure to help recreate their cities. Robert Moses remodeled New York City based off of Hausman's example, being sure to incorporate a system of highway transformations, suburbanization, and completely re-engineering of the city. Harvey's ultimate argument regarding the right to the city was to be more than just access to what we already have, but the right to change our city, to make the cities reflect society's desires rather than our desires be stemmed from the city. Harvey takes a long time to articulate this argument throughout the article. He spends the majority of the beginning of the article recalling past experiences with urbanization and its complications due to the capitalistic economy. He then uses the second half of the article to outline problems that are currently preventing us from achieving this full right to this city. Although Harvey addresses good arguments for what keeps us away from obtaining the right to make the city different, he never answers his own question concerning what is social justice in regards to the urban life. Harvey resolves that the ruling class should not automatically determine justice, but he doesn't come up with the resolutions so that all society can be involved either. Harvey's overriding point, however, is that the urban movement has begun, and it's time to take back the city, as the slide before this showed you, and make it reflect who society really is. And just a note on the picture, based off of Harvey's, more Lefebvre's paper, there has been a social movement, a quasi-organization that is formed in cities where they really are trying to shape the city. And I think, Professor Murray, you put it on prior or whatever, the blog, but they are really trying to make cities into what people want and how people want to live and better shape that. So my discussion questions are, in the article, Harvey makes a bold statement where he says, violence is required to build a new urban world on the wreckage of the old. And after this quote, he uses an example from Hausman again, where he was tearing through the Persian slums and removing the working class as evidence of this approach. However, based on what we know in regards to Hausman's fall from grace, as Harvey calls it, in addition to Harvey's main point that the city should be a reflection of our heart's desires, is violence truly required in order to attain our pure right to the city? And also, is Harvey speculating that our heart's desire is to completely rid our environment of the lower class? Second question is, the article specifies several crises that erupted around urbanism. Do you think Harvey's intention was to say those cities could be prevented, those crises could be prevented in the future if urbanism is done according to his outline, or does it deal more with highlighting how the urban life can be improved? And then my last question is, Harvey struggles with the question of whose rights and whose city is being addressed in the definition of the right to the city. Whose rights need to be included? Is it the elite businessmen that are currently in charge? Is it the working class, the middle class? And is it possible to make a socially just city? And if so, then